To understand this movie, we need to start at the beginning, because this movie is told in chapters, with each chapter following a different character. We find out what happens to a teacher, an angry father of a missing child, a police officer, the school principal, a junkie, and the one child that was left behind, inspired heavily by films like Magnolia. The character of the cop even looks like this and has a moustache, because the writer wanted that character to closely resemble John C. Reilly's cop in Magnolia. The movie opens with the voice of a child narrator telling us this is a true story. A lot of people die in a lot of really weird ways, and it's been covered up. The narrator quickly sets up the movie for us, telling us that the teacher came to class, found only one child came to school that day, and that the night before the 17 children went missing at 2:17 a.m. We watched them get up and run down the street in the middle of the night with their arms out in this really creepy way. And the song that's playing whilst they do is All Things Must Pass by George Harrison, with the lyric, All Things Must Pass Away. The intro is kind of a quick catch-up of everything that's been going on so far. The teacher is talked to by the police, the remaining child is interviewed, and the story actually starts when the school's about to reopen 1 month later. There's a sort of town hall meeting in the school where the parents, the staff, and some grief counselors are giving talks. And that is where the story really begins, as we follow the character of the teacher, Justine. She's attending this meeting, and the opening line that we hear is what we can assume is the grief counselor saying, "What's important is we don't judge our grief. We might experience emotions we don't like, emotions besides sadness. Anger can be a helpful part of the grief cycle in instances of abandonment," only to be interrupted by the character of the angry grieving father, who stands up and takes issue with what is being said and demands to hear from Justine. Justine takes the stage and tries to explain that she doesn't know what happened and that she loved those kids, whilst they shout liar and for her to be locked up. The town is angry and they blame Justine. Only kids from her class went missing and they find it suspicious. The principal tells her to go straight home and lay low, but she doesn't. She stops at a liquor store, and the person who opens the door for her is the junkie who we'll meet later. All the characters' paths cross over at different times throughout the movie. She buys 2 big bottles of vodka and we see her get a phone call telling her to watch her back. She's been getting harassed since this all happened, and she goes home and drinks. There's a tense scene where someone rings her doorbell and bangs angrily on the door, scaring her, and when she goes outside to see, "Witch" has been painted onto her car. The next day, the principal tells her she needs to distance herself from the school, and while we see her reporting the paint on her car at the police station, she waves at another police officer. And then we see them meeting up at a bar, and things are a little awkward, cluing us into the fact that they have a history together. She even says to him at one point, "Everyone in this town thinks I'm a witch," almost saying, "Your girlfriend is a witch," and then correcting herself. The cop orders only a Coca-Cola, which surprises her, and she pressures him into having a drink, and then we cut to the morning and they clearly spent the night together and he's very hungover. But Justine isn't letting the missing kids issue go, and she follows the remaining child home. She wants to find out what happened and watches as he goes into the house and the door closes behind him. She rings the doorbell and knocks on the door, but there's no answer. The windows are all covered in newspapers and things seem a little off. She heads around back and peeks through a tear in the paper and sees the child's parents sat on the sofa in the dark. They're just sitting there, and she's startled and stumbles back, making loads of noise, and then looks back through the window, and they're sat in the exact same position. They haven't moved or reacted to her at all. So she leaves and asks the principal to check on them. He tells her that she's being inappropriate, spying on people, and to back off. So she goes back to the liquor store to buy some more vodka, and she's attacked by the wife of the police officer that she slept with, who pours the vodka all over her. A defeated Justine goes home, gets drunk, and goes to sleep. It's worth that we note at this point that Justine definitely has a drinking problem. It's revealed later that she even has a DUI in her past, and addiction is a running theme through this movie. Each of these characters have their own vices, their own things that they consume, and Justine's is drinking. But when she falls asleep, she has a nightmare of being in the school and going to her class. She finds all of the kids that went missing with their heads down on the table, and Alex, the one remaining child, sits up slowly and pulls a creepy face. But the real scare comes when she wakes up and sees a strange woman on her ceiling above her bed looking down at her. She screams, and when she looks back, the the woman is gone. This will be important later because characters keep having nightmares and visions that feature this woman. What I thought was interesting here is that she doesn't actually appear in Justine's dream or nightmare. She had woken up from the nightmare and sees her on the ceiling and screams, but she doesn't then wake up again. It doesn't do that classic thing of character has a dream, sees a scary thing, wakes up, sees the real scary thing and wakes up again. She was awake when she saw her. I'll explain why at the end. Justine again tries to follow and talk to Alex, the remaining child, and he screams at her, "Don't follow me," and he runs home. So Justine starts banging on his house door, asking for the parents to open, but they never do. So she goes back to her car and sits in it and watches the house, a sort of mini stakeout to see what's going on. But she's drinking while she's in the car waiting, and she falls asleep. We watch as the door of the house slowly opens, and a woman emerges out of the darkness holding scissors above her head. She walks really creepily, like it's a very effective, scary scene as she kind of stumbles and walks like a puppet as she emerges from the house and stomps her way to the car where Justine is still asleep. We then hear the back door of the car open and Justine doesn't wake, signs that she clearly has this drinking problem and has too much. As the person gets in behind, we don't see them, but the whole car shakes and she doesn't even stir. And this scene was super tense, honestly, because it's nighttime, we're just kind of sat there watching her asleep, and we know that someone is in the back of the car holding scissors. And then slowly the scissors just come into view and snip off a lock of her hair, and her chapter ends. Chapter 2 follows Archer. He's the angry dad from the meeting at the beginning and father of one of the missing children. We join him sleeping in his son's room in the kid's bed. Something people often do when they're experiencing grief is to sleep in places that make them feel closer to that person. His wife opens the door and looks at him like she's tired of this. She just says, "I'm going to work," and leaves. In that one small moment, that one line and that look, we're told everything we need to know about how Archer is coping and the fact that he isn't. His wife, the mother of the child, saying, "I'm going to work," and just leaving him there in his grief. She doesn't ask how he is, there's no kindness in it. It shows that she herself is trying to move on in her own way, and that they are doing this quite separately. The way she looks at him and leaves him there tells you that he's like this all the time and isn't trying to get better. We watch him obsess over the doorbell camera footage of his son leaving the house, over and over, watching it in reverse and forward. When he leaves the house, he stares at where the boy ran to, and he goes to work. The worker there says, "I've been calling you all morning, boss." He's late. The worker says some orders never got placed. The paint for the door is the wrong color. He's making mistakes. He apologizes and says he'll take the paint back and puts it in the back of his truck. More signs that he's not doing well. He's not coping with his grief. The world is moving on and he can't keep up. Which I think is fair enough. I think if your kid went missing, it would take more than a month to be back to normal. But it's important here because we're being shown that he is obsessed, that it's fully taking over his life and affecting his work and marriage. We watch as he goes to the police station to pester the police to do more and then go to the school meeting from the beginning and follow Justine home. He's the one who rang the doorbell, banged on her door and scared her, and vandalized her car with the paint that he was supposed to change. He wrote the word witch on the side of her car. You can also look at Archer as representing anger in the stages of grief. He then has a nightmare where it's 2:17 and he follows his son out of the house. He runs after him shouting his name, Matthew, and follows him into the woods and is led to a house and watches him run inside. And in this nightmare scene, above the house in the sky, he sees a giant kaiju-sized assault rifle weapon appear and the number 217, like an alarm clock, appears written on the side. More on what that means at the end. He runs into the house and finds his son in bed and asks him, "Where are you? Where did you go? Talk to me." He can barely get the words out as he's trying to say, "I'm sorry I didn't say it. I wanted to say it. I feel it all the time. I love you so much." And when he says that, Matthew turns into the old woman from people's dreams and smiles back at him scarily, and he wakes up. But this nightmare seems to wake something in Archer. As he's leaving the house, he looks and stares in the direction that he saw his son leaving, not only in the dream, but in the Ring camera footage. And he pulls out a map and he plots a straight line from his house. But he's going to need more data, so he goes to one of the other missing kids' homes and asks to see their Ring camera footage so that he can map a line and see where they coalesce. The mum says she's not really comfortable with that, so he waits outside for the dad to come home and asks him instead. The dad is played by Justin Long, which is a little cameo from his previous film Barbarian, as he played one of the main characters. Now he has 2 lines and he can see what direction they're going in, so he starts to head over there. This is when he sees Justine and her car with witch written on the side pulling in to get gas, and he goes to confront her. But when he's confronting her, the principal shows up running towards them crazily like the kids were when they ran out of the house, and he attacks Justine. Archer tries to help and is then attacked himself, and the chapter ends. And we then jump to our third character, but I promise you all of this does come together at the end and explains everything. Now we're following Paul, the police officer. He's on the phone with his wife, and from what he says, it sounds like they're trying for a baby, and we find out that Paul has a drinking problem. She says, "Are you going to a meeting after?" And he says, "I'm not going to drink, I feel fine." This circles us back to him ordering a Coca-Cola in the bar with Justine, and then being coaxed into having one and getting seemingly blackout drunk. We watch as he starts his shift and goes out on patrol and chases a junkie character whose name is James for trying to break into somewhere. He catches him, but when he's searching his pockets, he pricks himself on one of his needles, which both scares and angers him, so he punches James in the side of the head. He gets into his car and starts cleaning it off with a first aid kit, and then spots his dash camera and panics about losing his job. So he wakes James up, who was knocked unconscious, and kind of starts bargaining with him. He says, "I'll let you go, but I never want to see you again, and if I do, it's gonna go different." He realizes that he's committed police brutality, essentially, and doesn't want to lose his job. He tells his chief, who says, "Listen, if that guy doesn't come back here for a month, the camera will record over itself, and you'll be fine." And as he leaves, we see him get a text from Justine, and that is why he ends up in the bar and has a drink and ends up sleeping with her. It's showing how he copes with things. We've just seen him have this awful day, and he turns to drink and to lust. But he goes home the next morning, and he's still really hungover, and his wife is there, and she just knows instantly. And she says, "Where have you been?" And when he doesn't answer, she just knows, and she says, "You piece of shit." And that's obviously when she leaves and goes and attacks Justine. Clearly, it's not the first time this has happened, and perhaps this is Officer Paul's kind of problem. It's not just the drink, but also the adultery. So things are not going well for Paul, and he goes back to work and sees the junkie coming towards the police department, and this is the final straw. He jumps in his car and chases him down as the chapter ends. The next chapter focuses on and follows the character of the junkie called James. It introduces him doing substances, trying to get money on the phone, and checking car door handles to see if anyone left their car open to rob them. One does, and he steals a child's backpack. We see him callously throwing things out of the bag as he looks for anything worth some money. He takes the kid's tablet to a pawn shop and glances at a poster on the wall for the missing kids, and we can see that it says there's a $50,000 reward. The shop actually doesn't want this broken kid's tablet, and we then see the police chase from James's perspective after he tries to break into somewhere. It cuts out most of it, and we just see Officer Paul letting him go, and he still needs money, so he goes to break into a house. But unfortunately for him, he breaks into the creepy house with the puppet parents in, the home of the remaining child who was left behind, Alex. And as he's going around robbing the place, he's startled by the parents, sat on the couch, staring, not moving, just like they were earlier. They don't react to this person robbing their home right in front of them, so he just carries on. And when he goes down into the basement to see if he can find more to steal, he finds the missing children. They're all down there staring at the wall, which is what I call Blair Witching. If anyone's ever staring at a wall in a game or a movie, and hopefully never, but in real life as well, that's Blair Witching, and I assume that this is a Blair Witch reference. There is references to lots of horror movies all throughout this film. But here's the thing, when the kids all turn around at the exact same time, he's kind of freaked out, obviously as you would be, and he runs out of the basement and shuts the door, and he even puts some furniture in front of it. But does he leave? No, he continues robbing the place. It's at this point when the parents seem to activate and they stand up, and he's chased out of the house. He then goes back to that same pawn shop and he's selling everything that he stole. He then looks at the missing kids poster again and realizes that it's the kids that he saw and spots the $50,000 reward for finding them. So he calls the police, but not before getting high with the cash of the things that he stole. The fact that he didn't think to call anyone until he saw the $50,000 reward shows how little he thinks about others. But also, we now have the reason why he was going to the police station to tell them where the kids are, where he's then chased away by Officer Paul in his car. He runs into the woods to escape, and he sees the weird old lady in the woods waving at him. So James runs back to where he lives, which is a tent in the woods, and he hides inside it. Perhaps another Blair Witch reference with the tent. But then someone slowly starts to pull up the zipper of his tent, and he stabs them with a handful of needles, and it's Officer Paul again, who is obviously upset at being stabbed with 5 needles in the face, and he pulls his gun on James, who then begs and says he can show him where the missing kids are. Paul puts him in the back of his police car, and he goes in to search the house. But then we cut to nighttime, showing that Paul has been gone for a long time, and James has been stuck this whole time in the back of the car. But then we see that front door open again, and this time it's Officer Paul coming marching out of the house, and he drags James from the car, kicking and screaming into the house, and the door shuts, and the chapter ends. Now we get probably one of the most shocking chapters of the whole movie, and it's actually following the principal, Marcus. We see him in a supermarket. He's on the phone with Justine, the phone call that we saw earlier, as she tells him what she saw at the creepy house, and he says he'll call the boys' parents in and check on them. But when the time for the meeting comes, it is not the boys' parents that show up, but the ginger-haired, scary-looking old lady that has been appearing in people's nightmares and visions. And both the receptionist and Marcus look at her like, this is like a little weird. They're weirded out by her and they're kind of surprised. They act almost starstruck. Marcus even questions her and says, "Have we met before?" And she says no. She says her name is Gladys and that she is Alex's aunt, that Alex's mum is her baby sister. But Marcus insists he needs to see and speak to the parents, otherwise he has to get child services involved, and Gladys says they're just really unwell, a touch of consumption. Marcus says, consumption? He's a little baffled by that, saying, I thought that was something settlers got on the Oregon Trail, and Gladys just laughs loudly. But when Marcus insists he really needs to see them, she glances at some reading achievement ribbons in his office and says, well, this is very upsetting. We cut to Marcus at home with his husband, and they've got a tray of 7 hot dogs, chips, cookies, and carrots, and they sit down to eat. Couple this with Marcus's chapter opening in a supermarket and making food choices. Marcus seems to represent food addiction or consumption itself. That is his vice. The TV is showing a documentary about parasites, with the voiceover saying, "It is now that all free will has been lost. The ant moves under the direction of a mind separate from its own." It's talking about cordyceps, a parasitic fungi that takes over insects and controls them, eventually consuming the host. People might know cordyceps as the inspiration behind the virus in The Last of Us. It's the thing that turns people into zombies and causes the apocalypse in that world. Yes, it is actually a real thing, but there is no threat to humans. At least, not yet. Note that the husbands are both wearing Disney shirts of old-school Mickey Mouse. One seems to be Steamboat Willie and the other being a later depiction of Mickey. But what's important is how this could be seen to represent American consumerism, another hint to this chapter being about overconsumption. What better to represent that than the global behemoth that is Disney? Disney is a great sign of a massive American company and its representation and kind of spread across the world. So what better character to wear that than the character who represents food consumption and to an extent greed? Then the doorbell goes and it's Gladys. She spins some story about missing the bus and asks to come inside for water, but she insists a bowl of water, not a glass, saying it's a peculiarity of mine. I don't even try to rationalize it anymore. She gets a bowl of water, she takes a stick out of her bag that almost resembles like a wand, but it's like a twig from a plant, and she starts to wrap the ribbon from the principal's office around it. She scratches herself with the thorn on the stick, smearing it and sticking it to the ribbon. The husband offers help and a rag, and she cuts a lock of his hair and smears and wraps that up in there as well. So when Marcus goes to call the police, she then takes a bell from her bag with the number 6 on it, and she gives it a little ring. Immediately, Marcus goes into a trance and drops the phone. It's instantly clear to us that after all this build-up and wonder if Justine did something, or if Justine is, as the vandalism suggests, a witch, the witch is in fact Gladys. Or is she? I'll talk about her and what she really is at the end. Gladys wraps the husband's lock of hair that she just cut around the same stick and snaps it in two. Marcus immediately turns and attacks him, choking him and vomiting black goo all over his face. And then in a very disturbing scene, he just starts to headbutt him over and over again on the floor, until she finally drops the stick in the water and he stops instantly. Marcus, and we can assume others, are under the control of Gladys, and we watch as she wraps a blonde lock of hair around the same stick, which we assume to belong to Justine, considering what we know from earlier, and she snaps it again. And we watch Marcus go running, with his arms out just like the kids earlier in the film. He runs straight through all kinds of scenes and shops, just in as straight a line as he possibly can to find Justine. As we know from earlier, he attacks her, and that joins us up with the ending of the chapter earlier. We see Archer try to defend Justine and fight Marcus off, but he is absolutely relentless, chasing her around the gas station and out to her car. She drives away, he chases on foot, and Archer follows them both. But the chase doesn't go for long before Marcus is taken out by a car while chasing her in the middle of the road. And when Archer stops his car to check, we see that Marcus is kind of just a mess. His head is opened up all over the road. So now it's time for the ending and to get to your final chapter, because Archer and Justine are in the hospital getting fixed up from the attack. Justine says, "I've never seen anything like that." And Archer says, "I have. He was running just like the kids." He shows her his map of where the lines were pointing towards, and Justine is able to fill in the blank and say that Alex lives near there, and the chapter ends. It's then time for the chapter of Alex, the boy who was left behind, and to see things from his perspective. We watch him in school as the kids from his class, and actually Archer's son Matthew in particular, bully him and laugh at him. I spotted from his school project that his name is Alex Lilly, which is really important later, and I'll talk about that at the end. He's picked up by his father, who seems to be a sweet enough guy, and is told your mum's Aunt Gladys is coming over. She's sick, she doesn't have anywhere else to go. The kid says, "I don't even know her," and the dad says, "I don't either. I don't think your mum even knows her that well." Your first clue that maybe she isn't quite who she says she is. Remember earlier that Gladys told Marcus, "I'm Alex's aunt," but they're saying that she is Alex's mother's aunt. The story doesn't stay the same. And later that night, Alex watches from the window as his dad brings Gladys home, bringing her things in, which include a large potted plant which seems to be glowing at the tips, into the house. And the next morning, we overhear the parents saying, "We haven't seen her in 15 years. She didn't even show up to our wedding." The indication is that Gladys is very sick and doesn't have long left, and the husband even says she should be in a hospice. Alex even spies through her bedroom door and sees her laying in bed, wig off, totally bald, and staring back at him. And when nobody shows up the next day to pick Alex up from school, he has to walk home. And when he does, he finds his parents sat in a trance. They're unable to move, but his dad does turn to him slightly, saying, "Hey Alex, how was school?" kind of out the side of his mouth. Gladys comes in looking a lot healthier and happier than we've seen her so far. Alex keeps trying to rouse his parents out of their trance and is sent to his room and to bed without food for not listening. In the morning, we find his parents in the exact same place, still in the trance. He comes downstairs to find Gladys sitting there, who intimidates him into promising never to tell anyone that she is here or what is happening in this house. To prove her point, she does the stick trick again and makes the parents poke themselves in the face over and over again with a fork as Alex desperately tries to stop them. This explains why he shouts at the teacher to stop following him. He's protecting his parents. We see him find Gladys sat on the floor, almost meditating or in some sort of ritual with her magical plant in the pot. This is where she gets her sticks from to cast the spells. And she tells Alex to feed his parents soup to keep them alive through their trance. He feeds them Campbell's soup. That's all he feeds them, every day. There's some really important symbolism here because the soup can is absolutely everywhere. Earlier during James's chapter, when he breaks in there to steal things, there's just these soup cans absolutely all over the shop. But you need to know what's going on here to talk about it, so I'll come back to it at the end. And later he finds the previously spry Gladys, now looking unwell again, throwing up into a bucket in her room. She says, "I'm very sick, and I have been for a very long time. I was hoping your mum and dad would make me feel better, but it doesn't seem to be working." Alex wants to help her, hoping if he makes her better that she will leave and go home and it will save his parents. So she says by bringing an object that belongs to each child in his class to her, promising if she gets better, she'll go home. So Alex goes to school and steals an item from every child in the class, returning home to deliver them to Gladys. As she uses them to cast a spell like earlier in her bowl of water, and they go out the front of the house and watch all of the children come running down the street and into their home. This is why and how the kids got up at 2:17 a.m. and ran and disappeared. The understanding is that Gladys feeds on the life force of the people in the house. She needs more than the parents, and she takes these kids and puts them in the basement. And we know from the movie that this has been going on for a month. These kids have been missing for 30 days down in that basement while she drains their life force, and Alex is forced to feed his parents and the kids in the basement soup to keep them alive long enough so she can do this. Alex returns home and he finds Officer Paul and James inside in a trance. Gladys says to him, "We're leaving tomorrow, pack your things and don't step over the salt." Archer and Justine arrive to watch the house, and they see the police car there and are kind of weirded out by it. But Officer Paul steps out onto the front porch, being puppeted clearly, and he waves for them to come inside. So they do so, but when Justine steps over a salt line, Paul goes crazy and attacks her, and James attacks Archer. At the same time upstairs, Alex is trying to get to Gladys's room, which is being guarded by his parents, and he steps over their salt line, and they madly chase after him while he locks himself in his bedroom. James keeps running at Archer and is being thrown away over and over and over again, but he just keeps getting up and running, screaming at him. They fight their way and fall into the basement where Archer sees the children. Upstairs, Alex's parents are smashing the doors down and chasing him, acting like crazed zombies. And in the kitchen, Justine is being strangled by Paul, and she gets free by taking Paul's gun and shooting him. And she then shoots James, who is strangling Archer on the floor. Archer then goes deeper into the basement to search for his son, but is attacked by Gladys. We can assume that Gladys put some kind of spell on him down there, because when he comes back up, he attacks Justine and is kind of choking her from behind, holding her in place. Meanwhile, upstairs, Alex runs through Gladys's room and takes a stick from the magical tree. Meanwhile, back downstairs, Gladys comes up from the basement to watch Archer choking Justine. She has her wig off again, but her hair is down and it seems like it's been growing and getting longer as she's been getting healthier. She was completely bald when she first arrived and laying at death's door in bed, and now that she's getting her health back, her hair is growing back, but this would be her undoing, because Alex finds some of her hair in the bathroom upstairs, wraps it around the stick, and snaps it. And she senses this immediately and simply says, "Oh no." And we hear the stampeding feet of 17 children come running up from the basement, rampaging towards her, and she runs screaming from the house. The kids just jump through glass windows to continue the chase. Much like Marcus earlier, they've become heat-seeking missiles or weapons, but this time they're trained on Gladys. It's a scene that starts terrifying but soon turns comedic and almost farcical. Gladys is running and screaming and flailing her arms and her hands, and it's kind of hilarious. There's even a really comedic shot as she runs through someone else's back door and out of their front door, only for the children to follow, bursting through the windows to do the same. It feels like it's lifted directly from old comedy chases in old movies. We watch her as she runs through gardens with people watching on from their kitchen, people stopping as they mow the lawn just to watch an old lady get chased by a mob but not really do anything. Nobody particularly reacts, they just sort of go, "Huh, that's weird." And then Gladys is caught by one, and all of them set upon her, and they literally pull her apart with their bare hands. The way this happens simply has to be a reference to Day of the Dead, where Captain Rhodes is pulled apart in pretty much the same manner by a group of zombies. And as she's pulled apart, the trance seems to end. Archer stops attacking Justine and leaves the house. He follows the trail of destruction that the kids have left behind until he finds them standing over the mess that is left of Gladys. The kids are all just standing around, still looking a bit like they're in a trance. Justine finds Alex upstairs hugging his parents, who appear to be basically brain dead. And then we hear the child narrator from the beginning. Their voice returns as we watch Archer carry his son away over his shoulder. She says, "Alex's parents are still being fed soup somewhere, just not by him. He moved to another town and lives with a different aunt, one that's a nicer lady. All the kids got reunited with their parents, and some have even started talking again this year." And then the movie just ends and the credits roll. But what does the ending mean? What's really going on in this movie? What's it really about? Who was Gladys? How did she do this? And what happens next? I'm going to answer all of your questions now, but now is a great time to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this breakdown, and also let me know in a comment what you thought of the film. This is a movie club after all, so comments are encouraged, and share your opinion on Weapons and anything that you picked up on, and talk about the movie. So what is Weapons about? It's like a modern-day fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm, not your Disneyfied Snow White, but the weird and terrifying, disturbing tales of old, where even children aren't safe, where things are vague, unknown, and full of symbolism. On the surface, it's a story about a witch and the havoc that she wreaks on this small town, but actually there's a lot more going on, so let's get into it. First of all, what does that ending mean? Because before we get deeper into anything else, the movie's ending is very jarring. It feels like it ends suddenly. The kids do what they do, we get 2 lines of narration for what comes next, and boom, credits. No word on Justine, Archer, Matthew, or anyone. So what's it all about? To understand the lines at the end of the movie, you have to go back to the beginning, with a child voice telling you this is a true story that was covered up because the police were so embarrassed. And the final line, the child's voice saying, "Some have even started talking this year." The voice that you hear open and close the movie is probably one of the children who survived and has just started to talk again, so can tell the story. But the truth behind the scenes is that this was not how the film ended. It actually ended without any voiceover at all. We just zoomed into Matthew's eyes and that faraway look on his dad's shoulder, and the movie ended. Test audiences did not like it, with writer and director saying, people were saying, what the F, and I absolutely cannot believe that's the ending. It can't end that way. So they went back and put the narration on top as a little bit more of an off-ramp from the movie. I can totally believe it, because I think this ending does leave you slightly cold, and if it had ended without the narration, I probably would have felt the same way. What we learn from the ending is that Alex's parents are essentially in a care home or an institution being fed soup, never recovering from being drained. They were in the house for longer with Gladys, they were drained for longer, and when there was only 2 of them, so they are absolutely done. Meanwhile, the children are recovering slowly, there was kind of more of them, the life drain was maybe less, and they're starting to talk again, but I'm not sure if we can say that they would ever truly recover, because the narration at the beginning says the kids left and never came back, which is weird, right? Because we see them rescued at the end, and the narration even says all of the children were reunited with their parents. So is there something else going on here? To understand this more, we've got to look at who is Gladys, where is she from, and what is she doing, and how does she do it. On the surface, in fairy tale terms, Gladys is a witch who puts people under her spell to drain their life force to stay alive longer. We can assume that she's been around and doing this for a very long time. But on another level, I think Gladys is a parasite, and that she not only affects the people in her immediate vicinity, but has affected this entire town. People seem to recognize her when she's forced to leave the house, as seen in the principal's office. Marcus looks at her funny, so does his receptionist. They look at her in a way that implies that they have also been having these visions and nightmares. The fact that Marcus throws up that black goo onto his husband could be seen as signifying that he was already infected by this parasite as well. Clues that point you towards this being about parasites and not just about witches and magic are the board in the schoolroom behind Justine. She was teaching the children about parasites. And the TV documentary in Marcus and his husband's room when they're sitting down for food is talking about parasites taking over people's brains. There is a clue to how old she is and for how long she's been doing it by her saying that she thinks they're ill with consumption. Another question you have to ask yourself is if you think Gladys is a witch, if she is the parasite, or if she is herself being controlled by something else. Could her magical tree actually be controlling her? When Marcus is hit by the car, I don't think what you see of his brain looks entirely normal. It looks very cordyceps-y, like something out of The Last of Us, like he's infected. And when Gladys is pulled apart at the end, I think if you look closely in those split seconds, neither does she look like a normal human brain inside. We see 2 long cordyceps very briefly inside her head that look similar to what we see grow out of the head of the ant on the screen in the documentary. This is all unconfirmed and hard to say for sure because it happens in blink and you miss it quick scenes, but I think there are visual clues here showing the hidden meaning behind this movie and what's in Gladys herself. Alex and his family's surname is Lilly, a type of plant, so if you believe that Gladys is really related to Alex and is his mum's aunt, there is another clue. The name Gladys means princess or ruler, so she would literally be Gladys Lilly, a princess or ruler of Lily. A lily is a plant, of course, but the name itself signifies purity and innocence, something which you would strongly associate with children. And the name Gladys is also linked to gladiolus, a type of flowering plant which is known as the sword lily. So literally the character's surname is Lily and the name links to Sword Lily. I mean, call me crazy, but I think it's an amazing coincidence if that's not intentional. I got the kid's name from the school project when he's leaving class during a flashback. I don't know if the surname appears anywhere else. It's not on the IMDb cast list. I think this is a pretty great spot, but what do you think? Let me know in a comment. Flowers play a big part of this, including in Gladys's fashion. Did you notice the ways that Gladys blooms like a flower at different points of the movie? This gives extra evidence to my theory that it's not as simple as Gladys is a witch, but that she is an extension and perhaps has the parasite in her too, and that it is actually the plant life that is doing everything. When she first shows up, she is bent over, frail and old, and as she drains the life force out of people, she starts to bloom in more ways than one. The first day we see her up and out of bed, after putting Alex's parents into the trance and starting to drain them, she is active. She has her wig on, and her colors are muted, and note that she also doesn't have any makeup on. Her brooch is a flower which is not yet blooming. Later in the timeline, even though it happens earlier in the movie, we see her in more colorful outfits. Her brooch is a flower in full bloom at different times to represent her own health and vitality and how much life force she has drained. The better a state she is in, the more colorful she gets, and her brooch represents her status like a video game health bar. And of course, she has that creepy but colorful makeup on. People are saying, what's with the clown makeup? It's not clown makeup, it's like a flower in bloom becoming more colorful. So if she is a witch, then she is some kind of plant witch, but I think there are so many nods to parasites in this that either Gladys is this plant parasite herself and was taken over a long time ago, or she is also under the spell of the plant. When Alex finds Gladys in her room throwing up with her wig off, she has what appears to be hair braids hanging over her face and head. But what if they aren't actually braids or a representative of something else? Again, we throw back to the documentary that's playing in Marcus and his husband's house talking about cordyceps. It very intentionally lingers on a visual that shows the cordyceps growing out the top of the ant's head when taking it over. What if these are symbolic of the true parasite itself that lives within Gladys, where she gets her power from, and what actually drives her to do what she does? What if a very, very long time ago she got this parasite in her and this is her way of staying alive? She does what she has to do to feed it before it drains the life out of her. What do you think? Let me know in a comment. But what is the movie really about? It's been revealed in interviews with the actors and with the writer and director that it's about grief. Josh Brolin said when the movie was pitched to him, he said it was about the stages of grief. And the writer and the director said, I had a tragedy in my life. Someone very, very, very close to me died suddenly, and I was so grief-stricken I just started writing weapons. It was a way to reckon with my own emotions. He says it's actually a really personal story, that some of the chapters are almost autobiographical, and that he lived through it himself. That drops us in when that's already happened. We're in the middle of the grief and watching how people react and cope and deal after a tragic event or loss. You can even start to look at the different characters as representing the different stages of grief. Justine shows denial, denying her involvement, but also watching her deny everyone else's approach of just moving on and getting on with life. She doesn't let go. She investigates what's happening on her own. Archer clearly represents anger. He is very angry at the loss of his son Matthew and isn't ready to move on at all. I think you see depression with James and with Officer Paul to some extent, and you see acceptance with Marcus the most, where he really just wants to get on with life and he's thinking about the optics of what looks good for the school. He wants to sweep it under the rug and move forward. I think another theme that you see run through the movie is people having vices, the ways that they cope with trauma and grief. Justine drinks, Paul drinks and commits adultery, Marcus eats, James abuses substances. They are all in some way consuming and representing, in Gladys's words, being sick with consumption. But not your old school Wild West consumption, but literally American consumerism. And I think this is symbolized by the Campbell's soup cans being everywhere. The first thing that came to my mind when I saw the Campbell's soup can was Andy Warhol's pop art series, where this represented American consumerism. The soup can features everywhere in that creepy house. It's the only thing that he feeds to his parents and to the kids in the basement, and the empty cans are left littering the place. So I think there is some symbolism there, and for how that is kind of like turning these kids into brain rot trance-like zombies. If you think about Marx's tray of food, that's for 2 people, and there's 7 American hot dogs in there, all covered in mustard. There's American chips and cookies, and it's overconsumption. The film lingers on that tray to show you that this is what they ate and that it's too much for 2 people, that this is his vice and it is representative of something else. What is the significance of the number 217? The kids all got up and left at 2:17 a.m., and I think that the significance has been discovered. In July of 2022, the American House of Representatives voted in favor of new firearm restrictions, and the result of the vote was 213 against and 217 for. That feels like a quite big coincidence when you've got a massive rifle in the sky in the dream and it has the number 217 on it. People think it's about, and I'm going to say this for the YouTube filter, someone who goes in and blasts up school. We see a bullied kid be the only survivor, the remaining child, and all his classmates go missing. The assault rifle in the sky, a literal weapon in the air above the house in Archer's nightmare. These have to be clear nods and influences on the writing in the movie, but writer and director Zach Cregger said, "To me, it's not about that. I don't want this movie to be political at all." But let's be real, there has to be some influence on this here, because you don't put a giant kaiju-sized assault rifle in the sky above a house where kids went missing unless you're making some kind of statement. The movie is literally called Weapons. So why is it called Weapons? I think there are 3 potential reasons for why it's called Weapons. The first is because people are turned into literal weapons under GLADYS's control. We see her do this all throughout the second half of the movie. The second is because this movie looks at a lot of themes of how we weaponize things against ourselves: drink, lust, food, consuming. And thirdly, Zach Cregger himself has said that he just likes these kind of vague one-word titles because it forces you to look deeper and think about what it's really about. Long story short, he's not really going to tell us and we have to talk about it, so drop what you think in a comment below. You can also look at Justine's chapter as being a look at cancel culture and mob mentality. She's unfairly blamed for something that happened and hounded in a small town. There are elements to this movie that are different sideways looks at parts of American capitalism, consumerism, and culture. We see a society that doesn't really care about or take care of its kids, and we see the kids themselves having brain rot and disappearing, becoming detached from society, family, and community, until they re-emerge in a violent eruption. People's apathy towards these children and each other is seen throughout the entire movie. Look at James's chapter. He sees a bunch of kids being kept in a basement in a creepy house with 2 parents in a trance upstairs who attack him, and when he escapes, he tells no one. He calls no one. He goes to sell what he stole, and only when he sees there's a $50,000 reward does he decide to tell the police. And even then, he doesn't rush to do it. He spends and smokes the money away before he calls them. He does not care about the children. A normal person's reaction to finding any number of kids in a basement would be to call for help immediately after getting out of the house, let alone in a town where these missing children are big news. It represents the selfishness of us as humans, as consumers to one another, and the apathy towards each other in community. We see Archer not really caring about his wife. They're both going through it, but he is consumed by his own grief and his own feelings. Justine doesn't care about her ex-boyfriend's drinking problem or his current wife. She pushes him to drink and then sleeps with him. You might say that Justine cares about Alex because she's following him and investigating the missing kids, but even Marcus says to her, "That's not what's best for Alex, it's you trying to do what's best for you." She's doing it for herself because she's being harassed and people think that she had something to do with it. Evidenced in the fact that when she actually watches the house to see what's going on with this kid, she drinks, gets drunk, and falls asleep. You can say that of the main characters, Alex is probably the only innocent party in all of this. He's a child. He represents innocence. He's picked on at school but doesn't fight back. We get the sense that he's a good student. He has dinosaurs and maps on his wall and school projects that he brings home with him. He's a smart, caring kid that is just trying to save his parents, and it's honestly really sad that he doesn't manage to do it. But what happens after the credits end? Would Justine get in trouble for shooting 2 people in that house? What we're told is that it's been covered up, so maybe she gets away with it, but there's no confirmation. But the real worry is the fact that at the start the narration says the kids never came home. I'm wondering if the kids that left that house are not the same as they were when they went in. What if through the process of being under GLADYS's spell, being in that house and being in that trance, they themselves have become victims to whatever parasite was controlling her? I think the fact that Zach wanted to end this movie with Matthew just looking into the camera over his dad's shoulder as he's carried away, that might be what's really going on here. These kids are not okay as a result of the consumption and the consumerism that we've seen symbolized through this movie, and how that is a parasite inside of them, and it's going to come back up later. The writer and director even says he already has an idea for a sequel that he would like to do in this world someday. What if they have now gone out into the world with this parasite inside them and become weapons?